It's January now, we're past the solstice, but that doesn't mean that it's all systems go. Here are my top tips for beekeeping in January, and I'm going to tell you what our focus is going to be in the apiary this month. Day lengths are increasing, and this is the first signal to the bees that spring is on its way, before they start ramping up for spring. It's still very much winter-like in the colony. Overnight temperatures remain cold, and there's still very little pollen coming into the hives at the moment. Whilst I'm out and about, I can see the very first signs of hazel catkins on the trees. That's the second signal for the bees that spring is on its way. Once those overnight temperatures start increasing, that's the final trigger for the bees to start their spring expansion. At the moment, it's still just about survival, maintaining the brood nest and survival. Spring build-up isn't far away, it's on the horizon, but it's not just yet. Once those overnight temperatures rise, it makes it much easier for the bees to maintain the temperature of the brood nest, and they really will start raising their spring bees in earnest. Now, at that point, that's when we get into the real risks of starvation. Larvae require constant feeding, and that increases the colony's energy demand quite dramatically. Colonies that felt heavy just a short time earlier can quickly lose weight. So for us, here on out, it's weekly checks, which will heft the hive and add fondant wherever necessary. It's still far too cold at this time of year to be feeding syrup, so it's feeding fondant only. However, it is a balancing act. We really want the colonies to consume all of the stores that they've saved inside their brood nest. It's very important that when we get into the spring, the colony has as much room as possible for them to lay up all of their eggs and to raise their brood. If they haven't eaten all of their stores because we've just been adding fondant unnecessarily, then they'll remain very honey bound. And when they get that final signal, that fresh incoming pollen, and they go to lay all of those eggs, they simply won't have room. And that can lead to one or two things. Either the colony will not build up sufficiently to replace the winter bees when they start to die, or they'll simply run out of room and decide to swarm. We see that every year. Early season swarming is quite often, in my opinion, caused by overfeeding in the winter. Treating for varroa. Now at the moment there's still time to treat with your oxalic acid based treatments. There's still going to be very little brood inside these colonies. So if you want to treat, if you're intending to treat and you haven't done so yet, now is the time to do it. But once we start moving through the season into January, it's going to become too late to treat with oxalic acid based treatments. Oxalic acid based treatments will only treat for varroa that are on the bees. Once there's brood present, those varroa mites will get into those cells, and once the bees cap them over, oxalic acid is an absolutely useless treatment. But if you get into January, then a very good treatment method is to use an amatraz based strips. They require an 8-week treatment cycle. Now you cannot use amatraz based treatments when you've got the supers on. So if you consider by the end of January, if you haven't managed to do your oxalic acid based treatments, or you don't want to use oxalic acid and you still want to treat, then you can add the amatraz strips. 8 weeks from the end of January will get us into March, beginning of April, and that's really when we'll be adding our first supers on, and that's the time when those strips will be removed. So it's actually a really good time to knock down those mites with an alternative treatment from oxalic acid. Protect stored supers from wax moth. Now, wax moth absolutely love getting into supers that have had either brood laid up in them or have been stored with pollen in them. One of the things which is really effective against wax moth is to freeze the frames. So a really good tip at this time of year, and something we're going to be doing in the next week, is to pull your supers outside and store them outside for overnight, a couple of days, when those temperatures are going to be below freezing. I've looked at the forecast for the next week, and we're forecasting pretty chilly weather, so I'm going to take full advantage of that. Firstly, I cover the top of the supers with pallet wrap, and then I protect underneath the supers with some plywood, and that stops any rain getting in from the top or any mice or anything making their way up underneath. I'll move the supers out overnight for a couple of days in that cold weather. Freezing is one of the most effective methods for killing wax moth. So moving your supers out when it's freezing weather is an ideal way to get your supers frozen. After that cold shock, it will really knock the wax moth back, and I'll move the supers back in, store them, and before we know it, in a few weeks time, we'll be out sticking them on these hives. Moving hives in winter. Now normally we're bound by the 3 foot or 3 mile rule. Normally when bees orientate to their hive location, it's very specific, such a specific spot that if we move that colony, if we move that hive more than 3 feet away in any direction, the bees will struggle to find it. The alternative, in the summer, if we need to move them, is we have to move them more than 3 miles away, and that forces the bees to reorientate when they come out of the hive. They come outside and they go, oh, we don't recognize these surroundings. They're forced to reorientate. That resets their location to where home is. Now in the winter it's very different. In the winter, bees will spend weeks cooped up inside a hive. Over the next few weeks it's going to be very cold. There's going to be very few flying days for the bees to get out. What you'll notice in the winter is when bees leave and go on their cleansing flights or go out to forage for water, they will always do a reorientation flight. So it actually is a perfect time if you need to move the colony within the same apiary more than 3 feet and less than 3 miles. So here I've got a colony which I need to move about 15 meters down there. I'm going to take advantage of this cold weather. When it's nice and cold, I'm going to very gently pick the colony up and move them. I'm going to do it very gently because I don't want to disrupt the cluster. If I knock them and that cluster collapses, it might be too cold for them to get back in a ball before it's too late. So I'm just going to gently pick them up, move them, place them where I need to, 15 meters down the row. And on the next flying day, when those bees go out, they'll do their reorientation and that will reset their location for home. Ordering early season queens. Early spring is an excellent time to make early season splits. In May, if you take a 2-frame split and add a mated queen, that colony will build up very rapidly and they've got a very good chance still of making a little bit of honey in that year. So we like to take advantage of those early season queens that are offered. We've teamed up with a top UK queen breeder. That breeder has sent their queens over to Italy where the season starts much earlier. Their queens will get mated with other drones from other queens that they've sent over there. So you get a UK bee which is actually mated in Italy. They're then imported back into the UK and they're made available for us early in the season. It means that we get around a 2-month head start before our own queens are available, and it's a valuable resource if you want to have that early season expansion. But you have to order early. Once we get into April and May, they sell out so quickly. So if you need them, order them now. You can check out our website, jurassicbees.co.uk, and look for our early season queens. Finding new out apiaries. Now, whether you're looking to expand, you want to find your first out apiary, or maybe you just need to move apiaries, now is the perfect time to do that. It's actually a very quiet time of year for farmers, so it's a really good time to go and approach them. But secondly, you need time to go out and find where you want to keep those apiaries. You need time to reach out to the farmer, you need to go and meet them, you need to have a little discussion about what you want to do and set your expectations. You'll need to survey the site, you'll need to set up your hive stands. You might need to clear away weeds and brambles. In the winter, that's a really good time to do that. Before everything starts growing, if you need to get a strimmer out, now's the time to do it. And with that, we like to set up our apiaries before the spring expansion has really started. It's much, much easier to move smaller colonies than it is to move colonies once they've started their spring expansion, and certainly before they start adding supers onto them. So we like to go and meet new farmers now. We like to get ourselves set up well in advance. For us, the type of things we look for in an out apiary: security, away from members of the public, nice access and sheltered spots like this. We love to have a nice hedge behind us. You'll notice all of our apiaries were very sheltered from the winds. And finally, good forage. Now down here in Dorset we have some fantastic forage, so we're very lucky. We've got mixed agriculture, we've got plenty of wildflowers, we've got some heathers, and in this location we're very close to villages, so people's gardens and of course lots of woodland. So what that means is you've got a nice consistent amount of pollen and nectar throughout the year from all these different resources. That's the things that we look for in an out apiary. What I find is if you go to a village Facebook group or something similar to that and you make a post, explain that you're a beekeeper, explain that you're looking for a location to site some beehives, you'll be amazed at how many people reach out and want you to come and put bees on their land. So good luck in finding them, but don't be hasty. It's very easy to be picky now and choose the right out apiary rather than having to move once the season starts. one of our bees. Managing your deadouts. Now, let me just caveat this. I'm not telling you to go inside your hives and check if they're alive or not. Simply, if you're out on a sunny day and you notice other colonies are flying but one isn't, and you've perhaps noticed that for a few weeks, or if you're perhaps doing your feeding and you're adding fondant and you notice that there's no bees in there, then it's quite likely that you've got a deadout and a little bit more investigation is warranted. If you find a deadout, it's very important to seal up the hive. Close the hive entrance so no other bees can get in there. If you've got a deadout and any of the other bees in this apiary find that empty colony and they start robbing it out, that can be a disaster. If that colony died as a result of brood disease and a robin bee ends up finding that and starts robbing it out, then that's a very quick way for that disease to spread through your apiary. So what we do is we close up the hive and we move the hive away from the apiary as soon as possible. Once we get it back to base, we sterilize the boxes, and we burn all of the frames. We don't take any chances. There's only one thing worse than losing a colony of bees, and that's reusing equipment which has had disease and spreading that disease throughout your apiary, or when you get replacement bees in the spring. That's horrendous. So we don't take chances. The only time I suggest that it's okay to reuse those frames is if you are absolutely 100% sure that they did not die from disease. We don't take the chance. We sterilize the boxes, burn the frames, start afresh. And trust me, when you get your fresh set of bees in there, starting with all new equipment, all new frames and foundation and all new wax, it's brilliant. It sets them off exactly what they need. So it's just an absolute waste of time reusing old equipment unless you absolutely are 100% sure that they didn't die from disease. So there we go. January is all about observation and preparation. It's a hands-off month. We don't really get involved with much beekeeping besides adding fondant, hefting and treating for varroa. Most of the work we do now happens outside of the hive, but it has a huge impact for what happens for the rest of the year. Preparation, preparation, preparation. That's what January is all about. If you get your feeding right, treat for varroa, protect your equipment and get yourself prepared, that really sets you up for the best start for the season. And it's only literally a few weeks away now. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, keep an eye out for next month's update, where hopefully we'll start to see the very early signs of spring build-up inside the colonies.